I always thought of myself as a natural leader. Back in high school, I wasn't that quiet kid in the corner with his face in a book. I was the one everybody looked up to whenever there was a challenge or some big event to organize. My name is Kevin Thompson. I'm 32 years old, and my life started out on a bright path. I was the captain of our boxing club, and I used to stand confidently in front of the entire student body whenever a sports pep rally was happening. After graduation, I pursued different areas of interest. I discovered that I was quite good with managing people, reading their strengths, and figuring out how to motivate them. So I ended up becoming a manager in one of the restaurants owned by a large dining chain. It was a pretty big deal for someone my age, especially because I'd only been out of college for a few years when I got promoted. But I worked hard, took risks, and learned how to push my staff to excellence. Everyone said I had a knack for it, so when an old friend recommended me to the corporate office, they decided I was a good fit for a new and more prestigious location. My wife's name is Monica. She's 29, tall, with wavy dark hair, and she used to have such an innocent face that I always thought she was the sweetest woman in any room. I married her soon after college, believing we would be that perfect couple. Looking at how our lives had been for the past few years, I would have agreed that we had something special. Yet it turned out she was not the dream partner I imagined. Sometimes people fool you better than you could ever expect, and you don't see the blind spots until it's too late. We'd lived in a pleasant part of Denver, Colorado, surrounded by quiet neighbors who politely minded their own business. I had a comfortable place in management and thought my boss, Trevor White, was both demanding and slightly annoying, but I respected him. He was the kind of man who wanted to see results every single minute of every day. I won't call him incompetent because that would be untrue. He was quite knowledgeable in business processes, even though he had the habit of making me work through my weekends whenever the corporate office was preparing for big updates or new product rollouts. Monica seemed okay with it at first, always telling me that we needed the money and the stability. But over time, she started acting weird. She'd check her phone a lot, sometimes even when I was right there talking to her about our grocery list or about new ways to improve the restaurant's employee schedule. There were so many moments when I'd look at her, and she'd be glancing down at the glowing screen, typing messages or reading something with a strange little grin on her face. I'd tease her, "Is that phone more interesting than me?" And she'd look up, flustered, mutter an apology, then give me this half-hearted hug. One day, I realized that my entire schedule at the restaurant had been turned upside down. Trevor sent me an email at midnight demanding I come in at 6 in the morning on Saturday to handle the orientation of some new hires. Monica noticed I looked stressed and said, "Kevin, baby, I know this is tough, but we can't risk losing your position. People out there would be happy to step into your shoes if you quit or made a fuss." She seemed nervous as she said it, constantly sneaking glances at her phone. After a while, I got suspicious. It wasn't like her to push me so hard to keep a job that I was already good at and dedicated to. She never cared this obsessively about me not quitting. I asked, "Are you texting someone, or is it just your social media feed that's so interesting?" She looked at me with a forced smile and said, "Oh, just some updates from a friend." I tried to brush it off, but my intuition told me something was off. It wasn't until a Thursday morning, around 7, that everything changed. I woke up wanting to call the restaurant supply service to confirm a big order for fresh produce. Monica was still asleep, or so I thought. I walked over to our landline phone, which we rarely used, and I wanted to dial. But before I could, I heard muffled laughter and hushed whispers. Curious, I picked up the receiver and realized I was hearing a conversation on the line. We had an older phone system that sometimes let you hear if another handset was in use in the house. My heart skipped a beat because I recognized Monica's voice, and she sounded so flirtatious. She was giggling like she was talking to someone she had a crush on. I froze and listened, barely breathing. "Trevor, you better calm down," she whispered with a laugh. "I can't have you so excited every time we chat. If Kevin even suspects something, our whole plan goes up in flames." Trevor let out a low chuckle on the other end and said, You're too good at making me want more. We gotta be careful, though. I hear your husband's been hinting he might leave the job if I keep piling on the work. That jerk can't just quit on us. If he does, we won't be able to set him up the way we've been planning. I felt my stomach tighten as though I'd been punched. Did they say our plan? Then Monica said softly, "Yes, that idiot wants to walk away. He keeps complaining about working weekends, and if he actually goes through with quitting, we can't pin anything on him. And that means no big payout for us. I'm trying to distract him, but you gotta keep him around, Trevor. I want every penny we can squeeze out of him before we frame him." I tried to steady myself, my hands shaking as I held the phone. Trevor's voice grew serious. "We'll use that story of him beating you up or something like that. The second he walks away from the restaurant, it becomes harder to prove anything. We need him employed, stressed out, and not thinking clearly. Once he's on the edge, you'll call the cops and say he's been hurting you for months. Then we can get him fired with a scandal. I'll make sure he can't defend himself, and then the company's hush money or personal savings will come rolling our way. We can split it and vanish. Then we'll find a way to handle my wife, Becky, and force her out of the picture too." I heard Monica sigh in delight. "It's perfect. We just have to keep him from discovering anything until the time is right." They laughed together, and all I could do was stand there paralyzed. That's when it hit me. My wife was conspiring with my boss to ruin my life, claim I assaulted her, and probably take all my savings. She was even talking about destroying Trevor's wife, so they could be together, or so it sounded. I slammed the receiver down quietly, feeling my chest tighten. For a moment, rage overwhelmed me. I actually grabbed the pistol I kept locked in a little safe near my nightstand for home protection. My mind roared with fury, images flashing of confronting them in a violent outburst. But as quickly as that rage had come, I felt a wave of caution. I forced myself to breathe deeply. Shooting someone or threatening them with a gun in the heat of the moment would only land me in jail and give them exactly what they needed to declare me a violent abuser. I had to be smart. I had to think this through. I realized I needed real evidence to expose their plan, because just overhearing them once might not be enough in court. So I set the gun aside, swallowing all that fury, and decided on a more strategic approach. That day, I pretended everything was normal. I told Monica I had an early meeting and drove off, but instead of going straight to the restaurant, I made a stop at an old friend's place. His name was Walter Price, a private investigator I knew from my earlier days in downtown Denver. Walter had proven himself discreet and reliable when I recommended him to a former coworker who was dealing with a shady landlord. I told him I needed help, something serious. I explained the gist of what I overheard, and he raised an eyebrow. "Kevin, that's messed up," he said. "Your own wife? Man, I don't blame you if you want to go ballistic, but let's get your proof in a clean and legal way." We talked about how to set up recordings, gather logs of phone calls, and maybe track communications between Monica and Trevor. He agreed to help me out, gave me the contact info of a legal advisor who specialized in false domestic abuse claims, and told me to keep a cool head. "Don't tip them off," Walter insisted. "When people get cornered, they do stupid things. We want them to dig their own graves, you know?" I managed to get through the day at the restaurant, forcing a smile whenever Trevor walked by. He patted me on the back at one point and said, "Hey, Kev, everything good?" I just nodded. "Sure, boss. Just thinking about tomorrow's big meeting with the new vendor." He gave me a careful look, then shrugged and walked off. My insides churned at how fake he was. Hours earlier, he was whispering sweet nothings to Monica, calling me an idiot, and now he pretended we were pals. If there's one thing I can't stand, it's a phony. But I told myself to keep calm because I needed him to stay in the dark. Late that same night, after Monica fell asleep, I went through her phone. I saw text messages from Trevor, as well as calls, but nothing that spelled out a conspiracy. She had apparently deleted the most incriminating ones. I realized I needed the big guns, hidden cameras and microphones. So the next morning, I made an excuse to visit a digital store. I bought a set of small spy cams that could be hidden in corners, plus tiny audio recorders for each room. After my shift ended, I invited Walter over to show me how to set them up in the most effective way. He taught me to angle them so we'd get as much coverage as possible. We placed them in the living room, the kitchen, and the main hallway, but most importantly, in the master bedroom, where a lot of important conversations might happen. I also hid a couple outside near the garage, figuring that if Trevor ever came by, I'd catch him sneaking around. After the cameras were placed, I grabbed my phone and contacted Mr. Patrick Cunningham, who was not just a random executive, but the actual owner of the entire restaurant chain. It turned out I'd met him once at an awards ceremony, where I was recognized for outstanding customer service and effective management. He was a quiet, older gentleman who liked to observe everyone without being in the spotlight. The problem was, Trevor was the main manager on site, and he often acted like the big boss, ignoring that someone with more authority existed above him. I needed to speak to Mr. Cunningham about what was going on, because if Trevor was planning some kind of sabotage, it would hurt not only me but the company as well. Since Mr. Cunningham was traveling, we arranged a private video call. My face felt tense with anger as I retold the entire story. How I overheard Monica and Trevor plotting, how they planned to accuse me of abuse and walk away with my money, and how they even mentioned wrecking Trevor's wife's life along the way. Mr. Cunningham listened attentively, leaning closer to the camera a few times. His voice turned grave. "Kevin," he said, "this is extremely serious. If Trevor's been cooking up some illegal or unethical scheme, it could open our corporation up to huge liabilities. I can't allow that to happen, but we must proceed carefully. I want you to keep me updated. Record everything you can. If we get the evidence that Trevor is defrauding the company or setting you up, we'll make sure he faces consequences. As for your personal situation, I can recommend a top lawyer, but you must gather solid proof." We agreed to stay in touch via a personal, secure email account. I thanked him for his time and ended the call, feeling relieved to have someone with real power on my side. That night, I pretended all was normal again. Monica was in the kitchen, texting or checking her phone every 10 seconds. She gave me a distracted kiss on the cheek. "I made pasta," she said, barely looking at me. Her eyes darted back to her phone. I forced a smile and said, "Thanks, honey. You're the best." In my head, I was screaming, wanting to confront her, but I needed to wait for the right moment. When Saturday morning came, I told Monica that I had to travel out of town for a special restaurant seminar, courtesy of Mr. Cunningham's recommendation. In reality, we had no such seminar scheduled, but I wanted her to believe I'd be gone, so that any meeting between her and Trevor at our home would be unguarded. Monica's eyes lit up. She sent a text to someone the moment I said I was leaving. I pretended not to notice. Instead, I gave her a quick peck on the forehead, grabbed a travel bag stuffed with random clothes, and headed out. Once I was around the corner, I parked on a side street, quietly slipped into the neighbor's yard, and waited in my hidden spot. I turned on my phone so I could watch the hidden camera feeds. And yes, the first thing I saw was Monica tapping away on her phone, presumably telling Trevor the coast was clear. My heart pounded with rage, but I told myself to be patient. By that evening, Trevor arrived, full of excitement. Through the bedroom camera, I saw him grab Monica's hand, pull her into a heated embrace, and it was clear they were about to have their wild night. But I wasn't going to wait for them to finish. I quietly crept inside, gun in hand, leaving the safety on but making sure I could switch it off if needed. As I moved toward the bedroom, I set my phone to record an external feed, wanting to catch them in the act. I could see on my phone that they were kissing and laughing, saying how they'd soon crush me with their false accusations. It made my blood boil. My heart hammered in my ears, but I forced myself to keep a cool head. I slammed the door open. They jumped, and Trevor instinctively tried to cover himself, though he was half-dressed. Monica gave a little shriek and froze. I held the pistol pointed at them, my grip steady. "Tie each other up," I ordered, tossing some rope onto the floor. "Do it now or so help me. You'll regret it." They looked at each other, fear in their eyes. "Kevin, please," Monica started to say, but I cut her off sharply. "Shut your mouth, you traitor. I heard your whole little plan." Trevor swallowed and began tying Monica's wrists, his hands trembling. I kept the gun aimed, though my finger was nowhere near the trigger yet. Once her hands were bound, I made her tie his hands, making sure they couldn't move without my say. No suggestive or intimate positions, just good old-fashioned ropes around their arms and legs so they couldn't run or fight me. When they were secure, I kicked Trevor's ribs lightly. "You scumbag," I told him. "You plotted to destroy me? You wanted to use the police to claim I beat my wife." I struck him once with my fist, just enough to give him a taste of real pain. "Take that, you worthless liar." He coughed and tried to speak, so I hit him one more time, just hard enough to knock the wind out of him. Monica was shouting, "Kevin, no. You've got it all wrong. Ismigale here. I heard you on the phone, you snake. Don't even try to lie. You were ready to ruin my life. You wanted to see me behind bars while and this lowlife took my money." I stared at both of them, shaking my head in disgust. After letting my anger out, I took a deep breath, trying to keep from doing something I'd regret. I had them right where I wanted them, but I had to think about the next step. I decided to film them in this humiliating state, using my phone to capture a clear video. I wasn't going to let them claim it was staged, so I made sure to show both of their faces, the rope, the disheveled bedroom. I asked them pointed questions to make them reveal they'd planned to accuse me of abuse. Of course they tried to dodge or say I misunderstood, but I kept pressing until they slipped up. Once I got enough, I walked out, locked the bedroom door from the outside, and rushed to my computer. I uploaded the video to an adult site that allowed user-generated content, labeling it with an anonymous account. Then I sent a link to Monica's parents, along with a brief message. "I'm sorry you had to see this, but you need to know the truth about your daughter." I did the same for Trevor's wife, Becky. My heart pounded as I clicked send. This was a brutal move, but they had earned it, given the extent of their betrayal. A part of me felt a pang of guilt about humiliating them so publicly, but then I remembered they wanted to frame me for domestic violence. That killed any sympathy. After that, I grabbed my phone and texted Mr. Cunningham, telling him I had major updates. It didn't take long for the reactions to explode. Monica's mother called me in tears, screaming that this was impossible. Her father demanded an explanation. I told them calmly that I had just left the house after discovering Monica with her boss. "I have more evidence," I said, "and I'm sorry it came out this way, but Monica planned to accuse me of abuse. She was conspiring with Trevor to take everything I had." Her parents were silent for a moment. Then her mother cried, "We're on our way." I figured they would come over and see the truth for themselves. Meanwhile, Trevor's wife, Becky, started blowing up my phone with calls and messages. She was horrified, furious, and heartbroken. "I can't believe he would do this," she said between sobs. "You can't believe how disgusted I am. That vile scoundrel was always sweet to my face, and now I see who he truly is." I felt sorry for Becky, but I also knew she deserved to know the reality of her marriage. She asked, "What's going to happen now?" I replied, "That's up to the police and the company. I have enough proof to ruin him for what he did. You should talk to a lawyer, Becky." Within the hour, Monica's parents arrived, banging on my door, demanding I let them see their daughter. I opened up, letting them inside. I led them to the locked bedroom. They started pounding on it, calling Monica's name. I unlocked it carefully, half expecting Trevor to try something, but he just lay there, tied up, looking miserable. Monica's mother screamed, and her father's face turned red with anger. "Kevin, is this really necessary?" he barked. I glared at them. I found them plotting to frame me for abuse. I was going to lose everything if I didn't catch them. Are you proud of your little girl now? He looked at Monica, who was sobbing. She pleaded, Dad, please help me. This is all a misunderstanding. He's gone crazy. I shook my head. I have recordings, sir. Audio and video. She and Trevor admitted their plan to destroy me. Don't believe me? I'll show you all the footage. I'm done being the fool around here. They helped untie Monica and Trevor, and I didn't bother stopping them because at this point, I had the entire confrontation on my phone. Trevor tried to act like he was a victim of some assault by me, but once Monica's father stepped between us, I said, Feel free to call the cops if you want. You'll love how they react when they see the footage of you two. The law will be more interested in your conspiracy than my brandishing a weapon, especially since it's legal for me to own one in my home. Trevor realized I had him cornered, so he kept his mouth shut. Then Becky showed up. She refused to come inside. She just yelled from the porch, calling Trevor every vile name under the sun. She demanded his keys, his wallet, and told him he was done living with her. She said, I'm filing for divorce, you snake. Don't you dare call me to apologize. Trevor tried to walk outside, but she stormed off, got in her car, and sped away. By now, Monica's parents were emotionally wrecked, and they didn't know what to say. Monica cried that she wanted to go with them, so I just stepped aside, letting them gather her things. I saw her father's look of shame as he apologized to me. Son, I had no idea. I'm sorry. Then they left, with Monica trailing behind, refusing to make eye contact with me. I stood in the hallway, feeling an odd mix of triumph, heartbreak, and relief. Trevor had no reason to stay, so he mumbled, I'll see you in court, Kevin, and limped toward the front door, still cradling his side where I'd hit him. After they were gone, I locked the door, feeling the adrenaline drain out of me. I sank to the floor, resting my back against the wall, trying to gather my thoughts. The house felt eerily quiet, and the events of the past hour weighed heavily on me. I had effectively nuked my marriage, but my marriage was already destroyed the moment Monica chose to betray me. There was no turning back now. First things first, I contacted Walter, my private investigator friend, and told him I had all the evidence. He asked me to send him copies of the recordings. I did so. Then I emailed everything to Mr. Cunningham, explaining that this scenario showed Trevor was not only a moral disgrace, but also potentially dangerous. Mr. Cunningham replied instantly, telling me to stay calm and let him handle the corporate side. He said, Trevor has been mismanaging funds. We've been auditing records since you first told me about the phone conversation. This forced my hand to dig deeper. He's been moving money around, and now I have enough reason to fire him for cause. Great job exposing him, Kevin. Just as I finished reading that email, I got a call from Monica's father. He said, Kevin, we watched the entire video. We confronted our daughter, and she finally admitted she had been plotting with Trevor. She swears she never intended to actually follow through. I don't know if that's true or not, but either way, I'm sorry for how you got caught up in this. We're taking Monica with us to stay at our place. You can take whatever legal steps you need. My response was calm. Thank you for letting me know. I'll be contacting an attorney about a divorce, so you'll want to help her find a lawyer too. This is beyond repair. He sighed and said goodbye. That was that. I grabbed a stiff drink and just sat on my couch, phone in hand, reviewing the messages flooding in. Becky texted me once more, asking if there was any chance Trevor could fix this. I answered, He's a grown man. I don't think he can fix anything at this point. She replied with a sad face emoji and typed, I can't believe my life is torn apart just like that. I felt a little sympathy for her, but I was still too raw from my own betrayal to offer much comfort. After that, I decided to crash for the night, ignoring the swirling chaos around me. The next day, I got a call from Mr. Cunningham. Kevin, he said, I'll be flying into Denver tomorrow. We need to meet. This situation with Trevor is bigger than I expected. I want to talk about your future here and what we can do to protect you. I agreed, and soon after, I also got a visit from Walter, who brought over a large folder of documents. I did some digging, Walter explained. It looks like Trevor was funneling small amounts of money to an account under a fake name. He probably planned to blame missing funds on you as part of the setup or do something else shady. That made sense, given Trevor's willingness to lie about everything else. Man, I owe you big time, I told Walter. Whatever your fee is, I'll pay it. You saved me from a disaster. Walter just shrugged and gave me a nod. We've been friends a long time, but yeah, we'll square up on the finances later. My next move was to talk to a divorce lawyer. I made an appointment for Monday morning. I printed out all the evidence and labeled it neatly. Transcripts of phone conversations, text messages I recovered from the cloud, still shots from the hidden cameras. The lawyer, Ms. Hammond, looked at it all with wide eyes. "This is quite the file," she said. "Based on everything you've shown me, I see no problem pushing for a swift divorce. We can cite marital misconduct, infidelity, conspiracy to commit fraud, you name it. I believe the court will see this strongly in your favor." That was reassuring. My heart ached thinking that I had to legally end my marriage. But realistically, Monica and I were finished the moment she betrayed me. When Mr. Cunningham arrived that Tuesday, we met at a quiet cafe. He was a tall man with gray hair, wearing a simple jacket. We spoke in hushed tones. He explained that Trevor had been terminated immediately with cause, and the legal department was preparing to file charges if they found enough financial wrongdoing. As for me, Mr. Cunningham said, "Kevin, we want you to remain with the company. We appreciate what you did by bringing this to our attention. You saved us from a serious liability. I'd like to offer you a position as my personal assistant at the corporate office for the time being. It may not be a permanent role, but it comes with a substantial pay increase and an opportunity to move up. You have a talent for running things, and I'd like to see you grow." I almost couldn't believe my ears. Despite the heartbreak in my personal life, my professional life was about to get a massive boost. I accepted. Of course. I shook his hand and thanked him for the chance. He nodded solemnly and said, "Trevor White was a good talker, but it seems he was also a rotten apple. I'd like to keep the rest of my orchard healthy. We'll rely on your honesty and leadership to set a better standard." His words felt like a rare compliment from someone with power and influence. I promised I would do my best. Back at home, I was packing Monica's remaining items into boxes. She texted me a few times to say she wanted to pick them up. I told her to coordinate with my lawyer. I didn't want to see her. I needed closure, not more drama. Meanwhile, Becky also served Trevor with divorce papers, which, from what I heard, made him furious. He tried to call me once, leaving a voicemail. "Kevin, you think you've won, but you've just started a war. I have lawyers too, you know." I laughed bitterly and deleted his message. I had so much evidence of his wrongdoing that I doubted any court would side with him. Over the next few months, life changed drastically. I got a modest condo near the corporate office, figuring it was time to leave the home that I'd once shared with Monica. That place was full of memories, and I wanted a fresh start. The new job turned out to be interesting, as I was around the top executives, learning about higher-level strategy, marketing plans, and even expansions into new territories. Mr. Cunningham kept a close eye on me, praising me when I delivered good ideas and pulling me aside for constructive criticism when I slipped up. It felt like I had a mentor who genuinely wanted me to succeed, in stark contrast to the manipulative environment I'd had with Trevor. My divorce proceeded without much resistance from Monica. Her lawyer reached out to negotiate, but Ms. Hammond and I refused to budge on certain points. Monica didn't fight very hard, perhaps because she knew she'd lose spectacularly in a trial. Eventually, the papers were signed and that chapter of my life was closed. It was liberating. I'll admit, I spent a few nights alone, drinking whiskey and wondering how I ended up with someone who betrayed me so easily. But as they say, time heals. I gradually let go of the anger and found myself focusing on the future. Becky, for her part, kept in occasional contact. We shared the bond of having been deceived by the same pair. She told me Trevor was trying to claim some of their assets, but she had so much evidence of his wrongdoing that the judge didn't look kindly on his demands. He ended up with far less than he wanted. Eventually, I think he moved out of state. I never bothered to track him. As for Monica, I heard she started living in a small apartment near her parents. I didn't care to know more. If she found a new fling, that was her problem. All I cared about was that she no longer had any hold on me. Time passed, and I kept putting my best effort into my new role. Mr. Cunningham and I grew to trust each other a lot. One day, he dropped a hint that there might be an opening at a regional director level, and my name was on the short list. I felt a rush of excitement. In high school, I'd been a leader in boxing, but now I was about to become a leader in a major corporate setting. Life can be strange that way. Sometimes you find a better path after going through a crisis. Eventually, in the course of my day-to-day work, I got to know a woman named Linda Baker. She was in charge of marketing communications at the corporate office. We bumped into each other during an interdepartmental meeting, and I was immediately taken by her warmth. She had bright eyes and a confident smile. Over time, we started grabbing lunches together, then dinners. I told her a bit about my past, though at first, I was hesitant to mention the betrayal, the hidden cameras, or the entire fiasco with Trevor and Monica. But Linda was patient, and as I opened up, she just listened. She never judged me or acted like I was broken. She showed me that not everyone in this world is a schemer. Eventually, we started dating seriously. A year after my divorce was finalized, I proposed to Linda. She said yes, grinning ear to ear. We had a modest wedding at a charming lodge in the Rockies with a few close friends and family. Mr. Cunningham even sent us a lovely congratulatory note and a nice bottle of wine, saying he was proud to see two of his best employees find happiness. Linda and I were over the moon. We soon discovered we were expecting a child. 9 months later, our beautiful daughter was born, and we named her Penelope Thompson. The moment I held that tiny baby in my arms, I felt a wave of gratitude. My life had crashed and burned in a spectacular betrayal, but here I was, standing strong, building a new family with a woman I truly trusted. Out of a weird sense of closure, I once sent a picture of me, Linda, and Penelope to Monica's email, which I still had in my contacts. It read, "All is well. Hope you're living your life." I didn't include a return address that she could easily use. It was just a throwaway account. I heard later that Monica flipped out, throwing a major fit when she saw how happy I was. Well, that was her problem, not mine. In the end, I came to realize a few things. First, betrayal can come from the person you trust most. Second, staying calm and gathering evidence is always better than raging blindly, no matter how tempting vengeance can be. Third, there is such a thing as justice, and sometimes you just have to give it a push in the right direction. And last but not least, no matter how deep the betrayal, there's always a chance for a brighter future if you keep your head high and focus on what truly matters. Of course, I don't mean to say everything is perfect now. Life is never perfect. There are still challenges at work, occasional stress, and days when Linda and I disagree over small stuff. But we communicate honestly. We give each other respect. We don't hide secrets in locked phones or plot behind each other's backs. That alone feels like a precious gift. If there's one positive thing that came out of my disaster, it's a greater appreciation for honesty and genuine partnership. Monica's parents sent me a holiday card one winter, just a simple Merry Christmas, Kevin, with no pictures or mention of their daughter. I guess they either wanted to keep a connection or they just felt guilty. I politely sent them a Happy New Year back. I don't dwell on it too much, but I hope they realized I never wanted to cause them pain. Monica chose her path, and they got caught in the crossfire. On the professional side, I soared. Mr. Cunningham eventually promoted me to a regional role, overseeing multiple restaurant locations. I traveled around, training managers and making sure the company values were upheld. The irony is, Trevor had always talked about hard work paying off, but the moment he saw a shortcut that involved cheating and betraying employees, he took it. That path never leads anywhere good. If he had just done his job honestly, he could have thrived in the same company. But he chose to break the rules and hearts along the way, and that was his downfall. As for Trevor's ex-wife, Becky, I lost touch with her after her divorce was finalized. She probably moved on, hopefully to a new life free from lies. Part of me wanted to know if she was okay, but I also felt it might be better for both of us to move forward separately. We'd bonded over shared misery, but that's not always the strongest foundation for a friendship. Instead, I stayed close to Walter, who remained a good friend. In fact, I invited him to be Penelope's godfather, and he graciously accepted, joking that he'd teach her how to be a top-notch investigator one day. On a practical note, I learned a lot about how easy it is for unscrupulous people to fake abuse charges or try to manipulate the system. It was terrifying to realize how close I came to being labeled a violent husband. Had I not overheard that phone conversation, who knows how the story might have been twisted in a court of law, or how much money I might have lost. Now, whenever I hear about domestic disputes, I don't jump to conclusions. I remind myself that there are multiple sides to every story, and sometimes the truth is hidden under layers of deceit. To make sure others didn't get trapped by the same kind of conspiracy, I made a point of sharing my experience with names and details change in training sessions for new managers about workplace ethics and personal boundaries. I wanted them to understand how important it is to separate personal relationships from professional responsibilities. I explained that if you see any signs of colleagues doing something shady, you should speak up early rather than let it grow into a monstrous problem. Many managers thanked me for my candor. Some looked at me with pity, others with respect. Either way, I felt like I was giving them a cautionary tale that might spare them some heartache in the future. I recall one instance when an assistant manager approached me after a seminar and asked, "Mr. Thompson, how did you not lose your mind with rage when you found out about their betrayal?" I paused, thinking back to that morning with the phone in my hand, the wave of anger that nearly made me do something reckless. I almost did lose my mind, I admitted, but I realized that if I acted in violence or without a plan, I'd hand them exactly the ammunition they needed. Sometimes controlling your anger is the strongest move you can make. The young man nodded, seeming impressed. That's when I realized that my darkest chapter could become a powerful lesson for others. During the final settlement of the lawsuits, Mr. Cunningham kept me updated. The company did press criminal charges for the financial side of Trevor's behavior. He was found to have diverted funds and falsified certain invoices. A settlement was reached, but he also had to pay large fines. I don't know if he served any jail time, but I wouldn't be surprised if he had to do at least a few months or a year on probation. None of that was my main concern, though. I was free, my name was cleared, and I had a bright future ahead. That was all that mattered. The last time I saw Monica in person was at the final divorce hearing, months back. After that, I never saw her again. There was a strange sense of relief in that. Sometimes, I wonder if she feels any remorse. Maybe one day she'll look back on how she threw away her marriage for a doomed plan. But that's her life now. I try not to waste my energy on it. Linda and Penelope deserve my full attention, and they get it. We have our own home, with a cozy living room and a backyard where my daughter toddles around, chasing the dog. That is the life I want to nurture. Occasionally, people ask if I ever want to direct revenge on Monica, like seeing her behind bars or financially ruined. The truth is, I got my closure the moment she was exposed. Watching her parents' faces when they saw the footage was enough of a reality check. Knowing that Trevor and she failed in their twisted scheme was my biggest victory. At the same time, I learned to temper my thirst for revenge because carrying hate in your heart only poisons you. Let them deal with their own guilt. I'd rather focus on building something good with Linda. Looking back, The entire fiasco still feels surreal. One day, I was a happy husband with a stressful but successful job, and the next, I was facing the ugliest betrayal. It taught me that you can never be too careful when your gut sense tells you something is off. If someone is acting strangely, always consider the possibility that there's a reason behind it. Don't brush away your intuition. If you suspect you're being lied to, gather proof quietly and swiftly before anyone can cover their tracks. A few times, folks asked if I had nightmares about that confrontation, holding a gun and forcing two people to tie each other up. The honest answer is, yeah, it sometimes gave me nightmares. I'm not proud that I resorted to intimidation, but I also realized that in that moment, my entire life was on the line, and so was my future. They had planned to accuse me of a horrible crime. I needed a dramatic advantage to ensure I got the evidence that would save me. The intimidation I used was terrifying, but it worked. Still, if I had to do it again, I might try a less risky plan. It's easy to second-guess yourself afterward. What's done is done. After a year or so, people at work stopped gossiping about the incident. New drama came up in other departments, and the corporate world churned on. The employees at the old restaurant rarely mentioned Trevor, except to say, good riddance. He was always breathing down our necks for numbers while he was up to no good behind the scenes. I visited that location a few times, greeting the staff who remembered me. Some asked about Monica, but I brushed it off politely. We split up, was all I'd say. No need to delve into the details, unless they asked more pointedly. I had my peace. Now that I'm settled into my new life, I can say that there's a certain freedom in adversity. Once you survive a personal earthquake of that magnitude, smaller problems don't shake you as much. I learned to handle stress better, to approach conflict with a calm mind. I also learned the importance of real teamwork, real friendship, and real loyalty, things that can't be faked if you're going to create a strong environment. That's why Linda and I have a rule at home. Total transparency. We keep no secrets, no hidden phone calls, no sly messages. If something bothers us, we talk it out. It's a simple principle, but it's powerful. Sometimes I step into the ring at a local boxing gym just to blow off steam. The punching bag becomes a symbol of my past frustrations. I jab, hook, weave, remembering how close I came to losing everything. Then I let those memories dissolve with each punch. By the time I leave, I feel renewed, ready to kiss my daughter's cheek and hold my wife in my arms, thankful that I survived the madness. Life might not always go as planned, but sometimes it ends up better than you ever imagined. Walter stayed a consistent friend and even joked, "Dude, you should write a book about this." People would eat it up. Maybe I will someday, once Penelope is older, or if Linda and I decide to share the story as an example of how cunning people can be. For now, I'm happy to keep it mostly private. Telling it in a smaller circle is enough to keep me reminded of the lessons I learned. If I do write it all down, I'll definitely skip the explicit details and the humiliating parts. No need to drag that negativity out into the world more than I already have. Sometimes, people ask me if I hate Monica. I can't say I hate her. Hate is a strong word. I despise what she did, and I can't ever trust her again. But hating her would mean I'm stuck in the past. I prefer to stay in the present with Linda and Penelope. I pity Monica more than anything else. She threw away what could have been a happy marriage and a secure life for a foolish scheme with a creep like Trevor. That's a sad existence. There was a time I thought I would always see the ghost of that betrayal lurking around every corner. But as months turned to a year and then another, the ghost grew faint. My days filled with new joys. Watching Penelope learn to crawl, then walk, then say her first words. Celebrating Linda's birthday with a surprise party. Meeting new colleagues at the corporate office who had no idea of my dramatic background. I made sure to keep forging ahead, never letting the past define me. If there's one final note I'd leave with anyone reading about my experiences, it's this. Always trust your instincts, but don't let anger rule you. If you find out you've been betrayed, Gather proof, keep your head straight, and let truth be your weapon. People who lie, cheat, and manipulate often destroy themselves once you shine a light on their deception. It takes patience, courage, and a willingness to face ugly realities. But in the end, you might discover a whole new level of peace, and perhaps even a greater success than you originally envisioned. Thanks to the support of honest folks like Walter and the open-minded generosity of people like Mr. Cunningham, I found a way out of a pit that could have swallowed me whole. I'm grateful for the second chance I got, and I'm even more grateful for Linda, who showed me that true love means standing beside each other with genuine honesty. Holding my little girl, Penelope, I feel a warmth that tells me I did the right thing by exposing the lies. I took my lumps, faced a storm, and now stand on more solid ground. In the grand scheme of life, that's the best outcome I could hope for. So that's my story. It's not a fairy tale, but it's real, and it's mine. If you ever find yourself in a similar nightmare, remember that there's a path to get through it. You don't have to stoop to pure violence or let yourself be consumed by rage. Be smart, protect yourself, gather evidence, and trust in the power of truth. Because sometimes, just sometimes, truth can be your strongest ally when the people you counted on turn out to be the ones pulling you down.